when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
What exists, reality itself, is gorgeous. It is the plenum, the fullness of total joy. The universe is a celebration. It's a fireworks show to celebrate that existence is. Wowee.
For those of us seeking a life of meaning and purpose, capturing fulfillment in every moment of now, seeking the truths of our reality so we can live this life to its fullest. This is the Live This Life podcast. And I'm your host, Heath Cummings. I'm here to inspire you to ask yourself the question every day. Are you living or are you killing time?
Welcome back, lifers. Today we are going to be exploring some of the profound ancient wisdom that is the Tao Te Ching. So I have recently gotten a decent amount of messages from many of you asking about spirituality, primarily omnism, which it seems like that's something a lot of people are trying to dive into. They're sort of craving a little bit of more spiritual connection. And I feel like spirituality was something that I've gotten into a little bit earlier on in the podcast, but got away from in recent years. I think that's most likely because early on in my journey, I was diving so much into spirituality, but definitely shied away from it in the recent past couple of seasons. But I myself have found that I've been returning to it quite a bit more. And I've been in much more silent contemplation over the last few months, I guess, trying to reestablish sort of a connection with a higher power, a higher level of guidance in my life and clarity, and to get just general direction. I guess not for the sake of anything being stale, but I think it was just for the sake of like, okay, so what's next? When you tap into the flow and you're into all these different things in life, that higher guidance, when you don't seem like you're getting any sort of solid direction, is I think where a lot of people fall back into at their times where they're either in crisis or they're just at a point where they're like, okay, I need to get my compass squared away, and what's next? And whatever source that is outside of us, that thing that guides us into the higher states of being and the higher states of accomplishment and connection and everything in our lives, I feel like, we dive into all these different aspects of spirituality to get us there and guide us. And from what I've gathered, many of you are in the same boat. I've got these emails, quite a few of them lately. I've gotten some messages on social media, and many people are turning towards spirituality and requesting to dive into more of that kind of content. So, and not so much in a religious sense either. I think a lot of people are in sort of a similar boat in that sense as well, that a lot of people are trying to delve into spirituality without going into religion and the dogmas that are attached to it and everything else. And actually from what I've seen, a lot of people are turning away from organized religion for one reason or another and tapping into different aspects of what spirituality can actually mean in so many different forms. What turned me onto omnism in the first place, like if there was anything that I would identify as, the only thing that really resonated for me was omnism and identifying as an omnist. And for those of you who are not familiar with omnism, it's basically the belief that no single religion is truth, but that there are truth in pretty much all of them. And so you find yourself sort of like an a la carte sort of setup where portions of this one and portions of that one resonate with you, and it helps to create a full picture of spirituality in whatever sense of the word that means for you. And in the process, you end up developing probably one of the most profound and personal relationships with God, source, the creator, whatever you choose to call it. But I feel like instead of a very prescribed, box that religion can fit you in, you end up really delving into all these different parts of spirituality and what they mean to you. And that then creates just such a deep connection when you go through all of these different ways and philosophies that people throughout the eons of time have connected to that higher source. And, you end up diving a lot deeper. You finding that connection. And I think in the process, you find a lot more meaning and purpose in that way. And it takes a lot longer as well. You have to discern a lot of different information. But I feel like the end result of that work and that process, like nothing that's worth it is ever easy. This is one of those things. And I feel like it's the long road of developing, a spiritual aptitude about yourself. And the meaning and purpose that comes out of this as a byproduct is something that, I guess, have a bunch of people who have agreed in the same token where they've been a part of an organized religion at any given point, and it's led to a very profound, deep connection and meaning and purpose in their life. And I have found that it's basically been one of the most potent ways that we can enhance our modern lives as well, especially in these times of what I feel like is lost morality, and disconnection in the divine, and almost like a public mockery sometimes of tapping into spirituality. It blows my mind. There's this whole demographic of people who are very much tapping into spirituality. And then there's this whole other demographic of people that are making a mockery of it in a certain way. And I just think that disconnection, that polarization that's going on is driving people more towards spirituality. And it's also taking a huge chunk of the populace and driving them into the complete opposite. So in the face of the very obvious dereliction from the divine, I'm going to be tapping into some of the spiritual teachings that I've come across along the way in my ongoing journey. And although I haven't been very diverse in a lot of the things that I've dove into, there's a lot of different avenues that I'm aspiring to dive into and learn a lot more about. But, I've going to tap into the Tao Te Ching quite a bit. It's the one that I've looked into the most. It's the one that I've really resonated with the most when I read it, just getting that feeling of like, yes, like this concept right here is just ringing true to me. And it's weird because it's one of those books that the right chapter happens to pop up at the right time, kind of like the book Oneness. I've flipped through that book at random times and come across a chapter, just flipped through randomly, stopped on a certain chapter, and I was like, wow, this is the message I needed to hear today. That the whole divine connection thing that can happen every once in a while, I found it there. And the Tao Te Ching is very similar. Yeah, I've found when I've dove into it so many different times, there was something that resonated with me so deeply. But there's so many other things that I've learned from along the way as well. But the Tao is the one that I felt has taught me so much simplicity and a much calmer way of living that really counteracts who, I have been in the past, but also that counteracts the lives that we tend to live, which is why I've been so much into it in recent years. But I've dove into so much of the teachings of Jesus as well, not so much Christianity, because Christianity was a religion that was created from the teachings of Jesus. It's from everything that Jesus had supposedly said at one time, and he never intended for his life and his teachings to become a religion. People just happened to turn it into one after the fact. But the teachings of Jesus and some of the traditional Bible, a lot of it was very heavily altered. So I tend to shy away from it for a certain extent. I dive very much into the Lost Gospels, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Hinduism is another one that I found very connected with. Also Confucianism, and even dove into the Kabbalion and the Hermetic principles, and those really resonated with me as well. But the Tao is just one that's just different for me, and I'm currently just on that kick right now. And lately I have found that a lot of the teachings in there are very relevant to some of the stuff that I'm getting from listeners for questions and everything else. So today we're going to be diving into the Tao, particularly verse 50, exploring the art of appreciating life through simplicity and harmony. But before we do, I want to remind all of you to subscribe to the podcast. For those of you who are listening live on Wisdom, please follow the account. For those of you on whatever platform you're listening on, if you're watching on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on any podcasting platform that has ratings and reviews, please send those along. It is the listeners of this show and their dedicated following and sharing episodes and telling people about the show that's helped us reach the top of the charts in many different countries. And just recently, just this week, received even more charting information that we're in the top 50 in countries like Croatia. Big shout out to Costa Rica and the United Arab Emirates. So a huge shout out to everybody in those countries who is tuning in. And I guess overseas, it's I guess, difficult sometimes for their reviews. It's completely different on different platforms and everything. So the comments and the reviews sometimes don't make it to the actual platform. So if you leave it on iTunes, they may not show up here in the United States. It's super weird. But if you don't have the ability to leave a review wherever you're at, send me a note and I will read it on the air. You can send it to connect@livethislife.org and you can let us know what the show's done for you, what it's meant to you, and I will read your reviews on the air. And those are always a treat to find. They keep the wind in my sails to keep the ship cruising forward. So, all the effort that we put into this show, there's not a whole lot of stuff that you get back from it. But that actually does help keep things rolling along. And for those of you who are able to leave those reviews on the podcasting platforms, they help get us exposure out there in the sea of about 3 million podcasts. So it gets us out there and it helps us open the hearts and minds of that many more people. So please keep it up. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. As many of you know, mental health is something that I take very seriously. That's why I've chosen to partner the podcast with BetterHelp. Their licensed therapists can help you identify what areas of your life you're having difficulty with and help you ride the ups and downs of life. I've personally used BetterHelp, and I have to say, for somebody who's experienced with the process of seeing therapists, BetterHelp's resources are beyond amazing. You can choose from their network of over 30,000 licensed professionals to find one that you vibe with. Want a male, female, specific ethnicity, certain religious background? BetterHelp lets you narrow it down that specifically so you can find the perfect therapist for your care. And you can easily change therapists at any time, which I have no intention of doing because my therapist, Bruce, is the man. I have amazing conversations with him. I leave our sessions not only feeling like I've taken a weight off my shoulders, but I leave the sessions with objectives to accomplish for the next appointment. You can choose video, audio, or chat sessions that all go right through the app, as well as journal entries that you can send right to your therapist so they know ahead of time what you might want to work on. They offer live webinars on a range of subjects, all of which adds to the toolbox for your mental well-being. Jump on the solution that millions are turning to. Visit betterhelp.com/livethislife to get started and get 10% off your first month of therapy. That's betterhelp.com/livethislife. In the Tao Te Ching, which the name of that book actually translates into the book and the way of integrity, or something loosely affiliated with that. I've heard so many different interpretations of it. The Tao Te Ching was written over 2,000 years, almost 2,500 years ago by Lao Tzu. And the verses all pertain to life in some kind of unique way. And it really leaves a profound lesson for the student. And a lot of those verses are open to interpretation as well. They're really not strictly prescribed. Some of them are, loosely affiliated. They basically put a concept out there, and the interpretation can be so different from so many different people. And in verse 50, Lao Tzu speaks of the transformative power found in embracing the natural course of life and how simplicity of life can lead to a profound feeling of fulfillment. And in today's world, we are so bombarded by stimulus. We are captivated by capitalism and, possessed by possessions. And we are judged by how much grinding and accomplishing that we can get done. And we often get lost in all of that. It's not really what it is that we can get done, but it's more of the connections that we can make in so many different ways that can bring us the profound meaning and the lasting fulfillment and contentment in our lives, rather than the sort of short-lived and ever-ready dopamine fixes that are out there and available in this world. It's almost like this world is literally circling around that dopamine fix between substances and content, just conscious content and everything else. So to get back to a more internal, self-reflective, and simplistic state, I felt like this verse was the one where I had bookmarked several of them, and I looked at it and I was like, yes, this is the one I want to dive into. So today we're going to unravel the wisdom encapsulated in these ancient words and discuss the practical ways to integrate these teachings into our busy lives. So let's actually start by reading the verse itself. So here is verse 50 of the Tao Te Ching. Coming into life, entering death. The followers of life, 3 in 10. The followers of death, 3 in 10. Those whose lives are moved toward death, also 3 in 10. Why? because they live lives of excess. I've heard of those who are good at cultivating life. Traveling on the road, they do not encounter rhinos or tigers. Entering into an army, they're not harmed by weapons. Rhinos have nowhere to thrust their horns. Tigers have nowhere to clasp their claws. Soldiers have nowhere to lodge their blades. Why? Because they have no place for death. Now, to understand just the first part of that passage and the meaning of that one particular part, the followers of life, they're the ones who seek safety and a life that's well preserved. I have several very close relatives that are that way. They will question some of the adventurous stuff that I do, and they're always naysaying so many risks or risky behavior or anything where you're stepping out and you're growing, and it's like that grumbling of, I don't know if you should do that. And those are what that first one, the followers of life, 3 and 10, those are the people who take very little risk and very little challenges in their life, and they just want to play it safe. Then the next 3 and 10, the followers of death, they're the ones who are very self-destructive. They have very self-destructive tendencies. They rush into so many different situations and live their lives and put their health and safety at risk. It's almost like they just have a complete disregard for their life. And then you have the people who live to excess. And it's those people who, they basically start out living life to its fullest. You probably met those kind of people where they're going to do whatever they're going to do. They don't care what's going to happen, and they live lives to excess. Often it's the excess of alcohol, drugs, or so many different things that ultimately turn into a much expedited means to the grave. So when they talk about the 3 and 10s, the different 3 and 10s, it's those 3 areas that this verse was specifically talking about. But I've heard of so many different people who live lives. It's the 10% of the people who really are trying to live a life that is much more simplistic and connected. And that's amazing. It's basically just the 1/10 or the 10 out of 100 or 1 out of 10 that are actually living the lives of simplicity, that are diving into stuff like this, like the Tao and the spirituality. And that's what the verse is actually referring to. And there's so many different versions of this text as well. There's different translations, but what I'm reading here in the notes that I had from it is from one of the very simple and ancient translations of this classic text. So the marker that I had on here, and like I said before, there were several different markers within this book that I had saved for when I was going to do this next Tao Te Ching episode, and this one jumped right out at me. But for some reason, I think the reason why it jumped out so much at me was because I had placed myself as one of those different people at all different stages. I had been a person who was in the one of 3 of the trying to preserve life. I was in the version of the one of the 3 who was moving toward death quickly, and the one of the types of people who was living to excess, and now in the smaller demographic of somebody who is trying to just live a fulfilling life and not worried about any of the stuff that might come at the end of it all. At one time I was definitely one of those people who didn't fear death. It was a very arrogant air of immortality, and we tend to have that when we're young. And I know a lot of people who, even when they're not young, they have that frame of mind. But I remember being in that stage, that phase where nothing could hurt me, and I was going to live forever. In some of the most stupid and unrealistic ways that young people can really disregard the fragility of life. And then after death knocked at my door quite a few times, I had basically developed a fear of dying and really wanted to preserve my life and not do anything that was risky at all, just because I remembered being so terrified that I wasn't going to have the opportunity to do a whole lot of different things that I wanted to do. Particularly, I was terrified of dying and not being remembered for the person that I had the potential to be, because I didn't feel like I had lived up to my full potential, and I desperately wanted to. But the conditioning of life and the life I had lived at that particular time had gotten in the way and told me how I was supposed to act. And it was very contrary to what my spirit deep down inside actually felt like was the natural version of me. And I never actualized that potential. So I was like grasping onto life, like trying to live things super safe and protected, because I had a huge amount of regret if I didn't actually have that many years left. And now the clock was ticking very loudly for me. So, now having become a person who is leaving a whole different type of legacy behind, and someone who's leaving a legacy that's going to live long beyond my actual years, I have no place for death in my life, really. I'm one of those types of people that I just don't think about it anymore, because I know it's going to happen. One day it's going to happen for all of us, although I think I'm going to live to be like 150 at this point. But something's going to happen someday, and it's beyond my control. I have no idea when. There's a greater power that knows when, and when that time comes, that is what my destiny is. But I'm too busy enjoying what life has to offer and everything that's going on in the current moment, rather than focusing on what the potential of some future circumstance that might come up. And my tiny little brain is going to try and figure all that out. No, I'm not going to try and figure out when it's going to happen or how it's going to happen. And when it arrives at my feet, I just want to be able to say that I've lived the most fulfilling life that I possibly can. And thinking about when the end could come and how the end could come is going to get you in the complete opposite place from that feeling of contentment and lack of worry. We have, so many different attachments in this world, our ego, the material things, there's the complexities of our modern life and all the things that come along with it, all the possessions and all the status and everything that our modern world tells us we have to have. It's very difficult for us to find simplicity in those things and not have attachments to them. But, the gifts, some of the greatest gifts that we can get in life come along when you find that simplicity. And this is why I think this verse was the most relevant to me lately. And I think it was not only relevant, it was relevant to me directly, but I think it was relevant to the people who were asking me some of these questions most recently. So, all the stuff that I've taken on in my life, I think the simplicity is what I've been yearning for in recent months. I'd say for the last 7, 8, or 9 months since last summer. If you tap into some of the episodes from last summer, I was burnt out. I was ready to just give up on the world. I was really grinding away on a lot of stuff that was actually benefiting a lot of people. It was really not benefiting me directly. And it was almost like it wasn't good enough. And that made me really reevaluate everything that I was going to be doing in my life and how much time I was spending doing things that didn't actually bring me joy, that I was, I guess, doing it for the sake of other people, and I guess trying to find joy in the service to others, which there's totally nothing wrong with that. But when you've relied on just the sole accomplishments of what you could be doing and grinding out in this world to bring you joy, that's going to leave you flat, and it totally left me flat. I've had a lot of people tell me over the years as well, like, man, I don't know how you do what you do so much. You're the busiest person I know. And I guess for some reason I wore that like a badge of all these things I was doing for people and with people. Just everything that I had going on in my life, I wore it as some kind of badge of honor. And I didn't understand that. And I found the flaw that I've done this several times throughout my adult life. I've actually done it for most of my adult life. At a certain point, I had 3 jobs while I was in college. I lived on my own. I supported myself. I built everything I have now from absolutely nothing. And it took a lot of that grinding and effort. Like, you're not going to get there without putting in all of that effort and doing a lot of stuff. But so many of the things that I have up on the wall or in a scrapbook are from that doing. But there isn't a deep amount of fulfillment in those things. I've barely ever looked at some of those things from time to time. The old art crime articles and just all the different stuff I've ever done. It's cool you pop across it. I came across something on YouTube recently. It was a news article from 2014, a news interview that I did. And it was like, okay, yeah, cool, move on. It just literally went past it. There's a sense of fulfillment in certain ways, but the deep, profound senses of fulfillment that we can get when we move toward a life of simplicity and we're doing the things that resonate with us the most is just a completely different mindset. And there's so many things that, like I said, I've accomplished and moved on from, but they haven't given me that sense of being. And I've recently rediscovered those things just now. And I talk a lot about it, which is the crazy thing, is that I talk to people that I've coached. I mention a lot of it on the podcast that You need to stop doing so much in your life. You have to have a better sense of being. I encourage people to do this all the time. And ultimately, again, I have not been doing it myself. And I guess because of that lostness that I felt last summer, I've been doing so much to try and find myself again in a place where I started to feel very empty all over again. Running from one thing to the next can do that to you. You're not feeling like your efforts are appreciated can compound that whole entire thing. The lack of fulfillment if people aren't saying like, thank you for all the time you spend doing what you do. But when you're extremely busy and you're doing stuff for others, it takes away the time that you can spend doing things for yourself or the people who matter most to you. But then it also, is it really what you want to spend your time doing? Is it, if you had your absolute choice of this is going to give me the most joy, satisfaction in life, fulfillment, am I doing anything toward that end? Or are you just basically trying to seek the outward gratification from other people and the sense of accomplishment and everything else from the outside? And I think at certain points in my life, and even just recently, that I was trying to seek from the outside and it wasn't fulfilling. And the stuff on the inside wasn't getting tended to, which is what will fulfill us the most. Having that inner connection to who we are, that quiet time to make connections to higher power and higher guidance. It just wasn't there. So all the time that I was out there and doing things for the world, I really should have been taking a lot more time to tap into my being and focus on having genuine fun and experiential activities, because that's what it's going to bring us the fulfillment. I mean, at that point, what would one expect? I mean, to be honest, if you're doing so much stuff for the outside world, what would you expect? Like, you're not going to have those inner feelings of fulfillment. So I dove back into spirituality and I found myself there. And so, I immediately, I guess, the message that I immediately got was let go of all these other things that you're doing. The only way you're going to find that fulfillment, the only way you're going to feel better at this point in your life is just to let go. Let go of a lot of stuff that's just going on in your life. You know what you got to shed. It's that conversation you just have to have with yourself. No one else can tell it to you. You've got to tell it to yourself, no matter what it is, no matter what vice it is. It could be alcohol, tobacco, workaholic. It just could be anything that's going on. It's ultimately you that knows damn well what it is you've got to let go of in your life. And you ultimately have to look at those things and shed them away and take away the unnecessary layers of stuff you've laid upon yourself that you know are suffocating that inner fulfillment in your life. And all of those things that can make you feel more fulfilled, you will free up that space within your life to allow those things to come back to the surface. Even if you don't know what they are, likely they will show up. When you can show up to your own life and you can just be. You can just be there. You can be present. A lot of the passions, the things that excite you, the things that do let you feel fulfilled at the end of the day, those things will often bubble up. And that's the place where we open ourselves up. And that is what the flow of the Tao is called. You get to that place of being and that flow of the Tao actually just comes out. So the lesson that I got from this particular verse and sitting with it, I read it and it resonated with me so much. I'm like, okay, this is definitely going to be a full-on episode coming up. And I've sat on this for actually a few weeks and meditated on it, journaled some things about it. And then I've gone on some really nice, quiet walks in the woods recently. It's starting to warm up out here in New England. So we're starting to get all the snow's pretty much gone. It's been really nice out recently. So getting out there in the woods with just nothing but nature and silence and just getting out there and that tranquility has unlocked so many different things about what I can do about my own simplicity in my life. And really, I feel like that's exactly what we have to do. We have to get out there in the moments of clarity and eliminating all those outside stimulus, the scrolling on the phone, the text messages, the notifications, the to-do lists, just all of those things that our mind is on rather than on ourselves. When we turn all those things off, these things will eventually start to bubble up like, okay, you know what? I'm getting real excited about the fishing season coming up. I love to do trout fishing. I love being out in the streams and it's just being out in nature like I always love to do. And it's just another awesome hobby. And I'm like, okay, there's also another thing I've wanted to do. I've wanted to get a drone, like one of those ones that you can take some gorgeous, like high def footage from a high altitude and everything. So I went and got myself one of those recently, and I'm going to be able to do some cool stuff for the podcast and the YouTube channel with it. So it's like business with pleasure. But I'm like, those things came out of those moments of silence. And it was like, okay, so to have the time to do those things, Heath, what are you going to let go of? What is it exactly that you're going to shed so that you can have some of that tranquility and simplicity in your life? So those things came to the surface, and I've managed to start releasing some of the things in my life. And, you know, when you do that, you will end up being amazed at how much free space you can actually free up in such a busy life. When we're stepping away from that pursuit of more, just more money, more titles, more this and that, when we step away from trying to gather all of that and keep on gaining more and more, and we get back to that simplistic state, you'd be absolutely shocked at what actually bubbles up for you and ends up coming up as a passion and something that ends up giving you that deeper fulfillment. And a lot of those times, if you can take that passion and move with it in such sort of a natural way, it's amazing what will happen sometimes with those passions that they actually turn into opportunities. My wife just recently, you know, in trying to help her identify some of her passions, she has been passionate about dance her entire life. And here she is at 42 years old, and she actually re-enrolled in college courses and is in her second semester of doing dance. And I've been with this amazing woman for 23 years almost, and I have never seen her lit up and confident like I've seen her now. And opportunities are already coming in regards to that, and fulfillment's coming from it. But also I can see that just right on the horizon, more things are going to come from that. And it's the same thing with this podcast. You know, I started this on the whim, and moving on it with some passion and purpose, and the right connections have been made throughout these past 4 years. And here we are, sitting at number one spots in certain countries in our certain categories. And it's just because I've made time, and it was something I was passionate about. And often I get guidance when I get back down to that simplicity on where this is going to go next, and things just amazingly just come up. But for the people who are the high achievers, it's very difficult for them to slow down and try to listen to that guidance. You know, it's sort of an oxymoron to them. It's basically like their minds can't comprehend how slowing down can speed up their life. And I guess there's no real way that you can explain it better than I already have, other than just experiencing what happens when you actually do it and experiencing it for yourself. When we let go of things and we find something more out of our lives in the process, the light bulb just goes off. You know, something on the outside of us that's always stimulating us is always going to be grabbing our attention. And that's how this world has evolved lately. And it's something that once I've discovered it, it's like, now it's like disgusting to me. You know, now it's a very sour and bitter taste, kind of like what alcohol has become to me. You know, I used to drink a lot. I went through some serious stuff back in the day, and I definitely went into an excessive mode of consuming alcohol. And I have tapered off so much over the last like 12 years to the point where I had one margarita. And guys, I am the biggest fan of margaritas on this planet that lives. I love them. All vacation long, it's like bone-in chicken wings and margaritas at every restaurant we go to. And I had one this weekend, and it had been weeks, if not more than a month, that I'd had an alcoholic drink, and it just tore me up. And it, you know, basically those things that make us feel good in certain senses, those quick rewards, those dopamine hits, eventually you start shedding those things out of your life, and you sort of go on like a fast of all of those dopamine related things. You stop scrolling on social media, you stop doing the quick hit stuff that's giving you that dopamine hit. And then when the opportunity presents itself and you go to delve back into it, it's just like if you stop eating fast food altogether, the first time you go back and eat it, you're going to get sick to your stomach. And it's kind of how I feel when I went through sort of like a dopamine fast. It all of a sudden was no longer appealing. And I found myself instantaneously going, why are you wasting your time? You know that there's so much more that you could be doing with your time, and how much more fulfilled you will be a half an hour from now if you actually do something a little bit more. The things you know that are actually rewarding than sitting here and do death scrolling on TikTok or something. So when we can shed those things and we move away from all of those quick hit fixes, those things that are always trying to get your attention, the feel good rewards, something that's telling you like this is going to feel good, this is how it's going to be. Our whole phones are designed that exact way. When you move away from all those things and you're not relying on something else on the outside to give you that feel good emotion and tell you when you have permission to have that feel good emotion again, it's amazing the transformation that happens. Like I said, the only way you can really experience it is by experiencing it for yourself. And when those types of things, I guess, get our attention, it takes away from being present in the moment and we get so distracted. The present is the only thing that really can change our lives. The present is when you make every decision that you're ever going to make. 30 seconds from now, that moment will be right now. Every moment is now. Everything you're ever going to experience is now, no matter what it is we're talking about. That future will be a now moment when it arrives. And true abundance comes in the appreciation of that now moment. When you can be there, if you're one of those people who has been in that now moment, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're someone who has that gift of presence, which it's really not that hard to find, but if you are one of those people, you'll know what I'm talking about, especially if you've been one of those ones who's gone in contrast from that quick hit dopamine fix and all the outward gratification things in this world. Somebody's been busy with careers and everything else. If you slow down your life and you've actually experienced presence, you know exactly what I'm getting at. The concepts of the Tao is really on the fundamental principle of Wu Wei, which means non-action. The Tao is really something that advocates that you just slow everything down and that the state of effortless action aligned with the natural course of life is what's going to bring you all of the things that you desire in your life and the most fulfillment. And I've heard it described as sort of a mountain stream that's winding downhill. It will flow with a force that just can't be reckoned with. It can go around obstacles. It can cut valleys. It can move with unbelievable power. And it doesn't require jets or pumps or any sort of propulsion or anything. It can rage down the mountain just as it is. It's the nature of the mountain stream. But life is that flow. The Tao is that flow. But we tend to throw all of these weird obstacles at it. We put all these diversions and pipes and distractions on our life, and we divert that flow and thin it out. And we thin out that flow of life in all of these complex tributaries until ultimately we cut that flow off completely down to nothing but a trickle. And when we realize that if we surrender to the flow in the first place and we take away all those things that are cutting it off, that is not only the way that we're meant to live, but we find ourselves moving with that massive flow of the natural order of things. And our life tends to build some crazy momentum when we actually do that. I've found the most growth and the most sort of explosive springboards forward whenever I've just done these cleanses and just let everything go and get into a more deeper sense of presence and simplicity and everything. But what's crazy is, a lot of this stuff can sound like fluff, especially to a lot of people who are new to this. There's a lot of people who have known me from over the years, and they hear this podcast, they hear about me doing this, and they hear this podcast and are like, man, this is not the guy that I knew at any given point in any part that I ever thought I knew this guy. And I'll admit it to everybody who's listening, who you may have had a similar experience when you first start diving into this stuff. The philosophical woo-woo concepts and the feel-good filler material that sells books and seminars and all that kind of stuff, it can seem like it's not real. Like it's like there's no way. Like, what is this stuff? This isn't for me. Trust me, I can totally remember 7 or 8 years ago when I first started listening to some of these concepts and thought to myself, this seems like whimsical nonsense. Like, what are these people talking about? It's really not going to solve some of these major problems that I have going on in my life. They don't know what I'm going through. And I remember thinking to myself early on, especially early on in learning a lot about the Tao, how can slowing down actually give you more accomplishments in your life? How can doing less and that effortless action that the Tao promotes give you more? And it was confusing to me. And that's just it. we identify with the accomplishments and the doing so much, and the fulfillment just isn't there. The speed at which we can do things is often how we're measuring the metrics of success in our life. The amount of hours we spend, the amount of time we spend at the office, the lack of sleep that we get, or the lack of vacations we take, and the sick time that we leave on the books. It's some kind of stupid badge of honor that we deprive ourselves, the state of our own being. It's crazy. I've done it myself, and in the end, it's the same exact people who believe in that nonsense, that way of living, who maybe monetarily have a lot of stuff going on, but they are very unhappy and unfulfilled in their own lives. I've said that some of the rich people are just some of the most miserable people. They're just in a nicer part of town, a bigger house, and a nicer car. I've joked a whole bunch of times about how I've actually, those things don't buy you happiness, but I will full on admit that I'm a lot happier driving away from work at the end of the day in my Audi than I was driving in my old Ford that I had 10 years ago that barely had air conditioning and it didn't work all the time. It's rare to see somebody crying. I've said it many times. It's rare to see somebody crying of depression while they're zipping around on a jet ski. There is some truth to some of those things, that some of the rewards that you get in life can bring you some joy. But those things shouldn't be where all your joy lives. And I'm not saying by any sense of the concept that being spiritual beings, we shouldn't seek some form of reward or excitement and fulfillment, because the material things in this world can bring us a lot of joy. Those material things are part of experiential existence. We can feel the most alive when we take that amazing trip to somewhere tropical, and we hike to the top of a mountain and we stand in a secluded mountain waterfall, or you scuba dive in tropical water. You're standing at the base of the Great Pyramid. Just all of those different things can make you feel so alive. And go out there and do those things if you have that opportunity. But to do those things, you have to have some form of attention to the material so that you can get yourself there. It doesn't come for free in this world that we live in. What I'm getting at is our experiential existence it really shouldn't be completely rooted in the accomplishments and everything that we can get done. It has to be in balance and have a mix of being present, being in the moments of now, and being in that flow of the Tao and in complete alignment with the things that are going to please us when we are taking our last breath and we're looking back on it all. And we look at how we spent all those precious moments of time. The most precious commodity we can possibly have in our life is time. And when we look back on it all, we should be pleased at how we spent that currency of time. And I know, again, I'm going to sound like it's a little bit hypocritical, because at the beginning of the episode, I said we shouldn't worry about death as a part of life. But don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. When I say that, when I talk about taking our last breath, I'm just saying that we're looking back on how we spend our time, and that this life shouldn't have the fear of death. You should have, I guess, the fear of not feeling fulfilled when that time comes, and go toward those things of fulfillment feverishly. And, time is against all of us. It's a race. And being in the moments of now and being present, I guess, is the battle against that time. Because if you're distracted, time usually flies when you're doing things. Sometimes you can spend a ton of time just ripping through stuff. You're at a busy day at work, and before you know it, it's like, oh my God, look what time it is. But we can find the fulfillment when we are present as well. And time can tend to slow down and be more meaningful when we're in those present moments of now. And reaching the maximum amount of fulfillment in whatever way possible in those moments is what everybody should be steering their compass toward, whatever that looks like for you. And to find that, you just got to get down to a more simplistic way of living. That flow of life is going to come from simplicity, and not giving root to the things that can cause us harm and pain in our lives is the recipe to success. In this passage, it says, you don't give a rhinoceros a place to land its horn, or a tiger a place to claw, or the soldier a place to land its blade. The fear of death cannot enter because it's not in your awareness. But if you're simply too busy focusing on the things in life that will make you, I guess, feel outwardly gratified, you can't focus on the presence of simplicity and the presence of what it is that's really going to fulfill you in your own life. And for the people out there who are listening to this and can resonate with the types of things that I'm talking about, how busy I tend to be, how productive I appear to be on the external, this is part of, I guess, a recent episode where I said that we have to forge ourselves. The last episode that I actually just did, that forging ourselves to the person we want to be is like forging an iron blade. It's a process that doesn't just happen overnight. And I'm a person who has done this to himself in life several major times. I'm sitting here preaching all this stuff, and this is like the third major time that I have gone through these busy periods for long extended periods of time and had to stop and put the brakes on and be like, what the hell are you doing? You're not living a fulfilling life. You're miserable. You're not doing the things you know you're going to enjoy. And it's just a process, you guys. Everything is a process of building habits and healthy thoughts and healthy ways of looking at everything in your life and moving toward those things. And you're going to relapse. And sometimes we move backwards on it, and I've sacrificed my inner fulfillment many, many times and the simplicity of life for the sake of accomplishing things. But the most important part is we're here in Earth School. We're learning everything we possibly can at the time frame that our being is ready to learn it. And no matter how many times we have to go through that lesson, we're going to do it. We're going to learn the lesson, and life's going to throw us another opportunity to prove that we actually learned the lesson. And I guess I learned it a little bit faster this time than I have in other times, but I'd say I got like a C- on the test this time. So I should have recognized it sooner. I should have never actually gotten myself into so many different things so that I'd lost that state of being. But the most important part is recognizing it. You put the brakes on it and you make the corrections that you have to make, and you get yourself back on track. And that's what this life is all about. It's interesting when you dive deep into yourself and you figure out why we do certain things. From what I've gotten from going to actually talk to therapists, one of the amazing sponsors of the show, BetterHelp, has a lot of amazing people that I've gotten so much insight from. So a little shout out to them as a sponsor. But when you can dive into why you've done certain things in your life, when you can understand the why you've done certain things on a subconscious level, it really does start to help you out quite a bit. You become a little bit more patient with yourself. Like I know I've been very frustrated with myself in the past when I've sort of discovered a relapse, or, why am I doing this to myself? I thought I knew this lesson. But if you can understand that the child that learned so many different habits early on in your life, that experienced certain things, that child that still lives inside you, that learned all these responses, and now those responses really govern how you react to certain things in your adult life, you start to understand the why you do certain things at certain times. And I've discovered that likely the reason why I took on so much throughout my life and through all these years is that at a younger age, there wasn't a whole lot of approval and praise for stuff, and didn't get a lot of that as a kid. And even in the years of my adult life, the many things I've done and accomplished throughout the years that were pretty extraordinary in my book and many other people's, I didn't get a lot of praise and approval from the people who mattered most. And I recognize that. And what's shifted over the years is that I've shifted so much away from needing that. I remember early on accomplishing a whole lot of stuff and just being like, man, people don't appreciate what I do. And if you're always there, you're going to be left empty-handed, because the world is, unfortunately, a majority of it, it's a very ungrateful at this point in history. If you're doing things for just the betterment of the world around you, that's what's going to help you feel a better sense of fulfillment. You're going to be left empty-handed if you're sitting there waiting for people to pat you on the back for everything that you do. So I recognize that doing things and trying to wait for the applause is going to lead to a lot of disappointment, but doing it for the sake of it's a fulfilling thing in and of itself for just me personally, that has led to that sense of accomplishment and fulfillment. So, in the time that you are grinding things out and you are doing things, if you can see the value of the service that you might be providing, that can give you that fulfillment in that place of grinding. But still, leaning toward the simplicity in life is the point of this episode, and that's what I'm trying to guide everybody toward. Recognizing the cycles in your life as well, when you're trying to tighten up your habits and you've fallen off the wagon, getting back on the wagon as fast as you possibly can is the part that a lot of people fall flat on as well. They just feel like, it's like New Year's resolutions and all that kind of stuff. People who are long-term listeners of the show know I despise New Year's resolutions. But when people fall off the wagon and they fall off of their regular habits of what it is they want to accomplish, so they sometimes give up. And the most important part is that it takes so long to build long-term habits. It takes so long to even read a book like the Tao Te Ching and incorporate what it says for knowledge into your life as genuine applied wisdom. And that's a difficult thing for a lot of people to fully grasp. But when they do, they become a little more patient with themselves as well. So, time will help those things and you build those habits and become more consistent. Because the discontent that you can have if you don't feel like you're grinding and you recognized you wanted to be somewhere and you've screwed something up and you're just going to throw your hands up and give up. It ends the journey right there. If you give up, you can guarantee you're never going to get to the goal that you were trying to get to. So give yourself some space and grace to incorporate a lot of these different things into your life because it does take time. And I'll tell you right now, I've let go of quite a few things in the last 8 to 9 months, and that was difficult in and of itself. And I can feel that little creeping thing come back in. I'll see a problem that needs to be taken care of, and I've gotten to the point where I'm like, no, there are other people that need to learn how to take care of these problems, and it's not something I need to do. If there's anything I need to help with, it's help inspire others to also get in the game and try and help fix some of the things in this world and trying to take it all on for myself, because anything other than that is a step in the direction that I'm identifying that I need to move away from. But it's very hard. It's hard for the doers because a lot of us are like, all right, you know what? You're not doing it right. Get the hell out of my way. I'll do it myself. You want it done right? Do it yourself. But you've got to break those habits and you got to give yourself the space and grace to incorporate those new habits into your life. So when you hear some of these things and think that it's just whimsical stuff, I mean, realize there's a lot of truth in all of it. These teachings have been around for thousands of years for a reason, and there's a lot of schools of philosophy that have been studying these all along the way for eons. And it's for a reason, because these are recipes on how to guide your life in a more fulfilling way. And it's amazing to learn from different teachers and learn from people along the way who are experts in this. And I'm just a student of the craft. I've spoken about this just recently so many times in episodes where I have people turn to me as this teacher, this leader and everything else. And it's like, okay, to a certain extent, I've done some studying and stuff like that, but I am just a student myself. And an inspiring quote that I learned from one of my mentors is that we best teach what we need to learn ourselves. And that's all I'm doing here, is that I'm learning these philosophies, grasping on them, and I'm just spitting it back out there to the world to inspire people and guide them along the way as well. So one of my favorite teachers that I've ever come across was the late, great Dr. Wayne Dyer, who was a major scholar in the Tao Te Ching. And I'm going to play a very quick clip. Actually, it's not too quick. I'm going to play a quick clip, but not too quick, from Dr. Wayne Dyer on the Tao Te Ching and his take on verse 50.
Living as an immortal. In this passage, Lao Tzu asks you to change the way you look at your mortality. The Tao teaches that death is an insignificant detail that doesn't need to be consciously struggled with or dreaded. As this verse of the Tao Te Ching informs you, there's a place where death cannot enter. Talk about your life changing when you change your thoughts. This is the ultimate, since the fear of death tops virtually everyone's list of anxieties. If you see yourself solely as a physical mortal, then you're part of the 90% of the population that this passage refers to as followers of life, followers of death, or just passing from birth to death. Here you're being encouraged to aspire to be part of the remaining 10% for whom thoughts of mortality don't invade the heart space or life in general. By altering the way you see death, you'll be in that select group. You'll experience life on the active side of infinity, knowing yourself first and foremost as a spiritual being having a temporary human experience, rather than the other way around. In this realm, you'll be gracefully adept at moving along free of the fear of life-threatening events. You'll have a knowing about yourself and your connection to the Tao that simply allows you to ride with life like a fearless downhill skier who's at one with the snow-covered mountains. Without resorting to judgment, you'll notice others who are perpetually victimized by scams and bureaucracies and indifference and natural disasters and criminals and meddling relatives and so on. With an intimate awareness of your infinite essence that's centered in the Tao, you'll most likely escape from victimization yourself, and you'll lightly deal with situations that others tend to get stuck in. In other words, when you know your own endless nature and live each day with this awareness directing you, there will simply be no space within you for mortality to call the shots. If harm ever does make an attempt to inflict damage or death on you, it won't find a place to sink its hooks in. Change how you think about death by seeing your essential spiritual beingness, and you'll be able to enjoy this world without the dread caused by believing you are of it. When you know your immortality through the flow of the Tao, you won't even need to assign it a worldly concept or formal religion. And when the time comes for you to remove the worn-out coat you call your body, Lao Tzu says, quote, "You will witness the end without ending," unquote. Contemplate the teachings of the Tao Te Ching and realize that you can never really be killed or even harmed. With this view of life, you'll be able to clear your inner battlefield of the army of beliefs that continually try to march on your essential self. Fear and dread are weapons that can't hurt or threaten you. Even the natural elements, symbolized by rhino's horns and tiger's claws, can't inflict damage because they butt against and tear at a space that has no solidity for them to inflict pain. You dwell in a place that cannot be penetrated by death. No longer are you clutching at the 10,000 things and treating your short journey from cradle to grave as your one and only ultimate life experience. Now you're the infinite Tao, living your real essence. Although Lao Tzu lived 25 centuries ago, he is still very much alive. I feel him urging you to heed the following bits of wisdom. First, create affirmations. Remind yourself, no one dies, including myself. Affirm that you can never be harmed or destroyed, for you are not your body. If you stay connected to this reality, you'll automatically deflect dangers that may have previously been able to invade your physical space. For example, as the Indian saint Muktananda lay dying, his devotees are said to have surrounded him, pleading, "Please don't leave." Muktananda replied, "Don't be silly. Where could I go?" The great Swami realized his true essence and knew that he was at an end without ending. And secondly, die while you're alive. In your imagination, contemplate the death of your physical shell. Visualize it lying there lifeless and observe how you, the witness, aren't identified with this corpse. Now bring that same attention to your body as it gets up and goes about its daily tasks. Nothing could harm your human form when it was dead, and nothing can harm you now because you are not that body. You're the invisible, witnessing essence. Remain in this realization, knowing that you've experienced the death of your earthly container as your primary source of identification. In this new awareness, you're impenetrable and free. Here's how Leonardo da Vinci expressed the message of this verse of the Tao Te Ching. Quote, "While I thought that I was learning how to live, I have been learning how to die." Unquote. Do this now while you're still alive. Do the Tao now. This Tao exercise is an inner vision quest in which you picture yourself as immune to harm. Create your own imagined picture of danger, or draw on the 50th verse of the Tao Te Ching for threats to your life. Tigers jump at you and miss. Swords are thrust at you, but do no damage. Bombs explode, but you're unscathed. Keep this image of yourself as incapable of being harmed, regardless of what goes on in your body. Then use this witness to your immortality vision to help you activate dormant protective forces that will accommodate you in fulfilling what you've imagined.
I absolutely love that guy. I wish I would have had the opportunity to meet him. He is by far one of my favorite philosophers. But his take on dying while you're still alive, that basically you die to death, that death doesn't affect you because it's no longer in your life. When it happens, but you're not living your life to the point of worrying about your own death, that you live every bit of life that you have in this moment that you have, and every moment that's going to come from now until when that unfortunate time comes. But you don't give the tiger a place to sink its teeth, and you give no place for death within your life because you're too busy in every single moment of now expressing your being and moving toward that more simplistic way of living life. So for those of you who are on the Wisdom app, I am going to take, I think I probably have time for about 3 people, probably no more than 5 minutes per person, to jump on and just give me your thoughts on this episode that we have been chatting about today. I have the Right Warrior on stage. I'm going to invite you up right now.
What we go through in life is about letting go. You know, letting go of the fear, letting go of expectations, and just embracing what is. So I think that's phenomenal. All religions share the same concept. I wish we could talk more about this, you know, across the world, all 8 billion of us, and realize how similar we are, even though there might seem to be differences between us. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you for your contribution. Sorry about the beginning of that. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty, so I caught most of that. But no, I completely agree. I wish that we were able to have these conversations without the religious dogmas that end up jumping in and dividing people. That a lot of these spiritual concepts and the concepts that are contained within most religions, they really are only there for one purpose, and that's to get us to a higher connection to whatever it is that's out there, that's guiding us and creating us and everything else. And I feel like that's why they're all there. And if we could have those conversations as a species, the world would be a much better place. But unfortunately, people get a little too tribal. But I feel like the world's evolving into that other direction. But I completely agree with you.
No, definitely. And I just want to say, I love allegory as a gospel poet and as a writer. And it's very similar, everything you've been talking about, to floating on water. Not to be confused with walking on water, which is something Jesus did, but floating on water, where the only way you can truly float on water, whether it's the pool or a nice lake or the ocean, is by inhaling, exhaling, by letting go and just relaxing your body. And sure, there might be a wave. Yeah, you might overthink, is that a shark below me or just a shadow of a seagull in the sky? However, the point is being at peace and just floating on the water with your arms out and just being in that moment. And that's how we have to live our life sometimes, right? Even with the distractions, even with the temptations, even with the obstacles in our way, just that moment, minute by minute, just embracing it and enjoying it. So kudos to you again for being a champion of change, for lack of a better word. Keep on doing your thing, and don't forget, everyone, stay hydrated.
Yes. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the contributions from those of you on Wisdom. This has been one of the coolest things that we've been able to connect, although, again, this technical difficulty, I don't know what it is. I've got a Rodecaster, and there's the device that connects to it, and you guys could hear me clearly the whole episode, but then sometimes we let people on, and I can't hear anything. I have to disconnect and hold the phone up to the microphone, but... So we are going to wrap this one up. I am going to close this episode out with a song from Soul Rising. This episode is off, or this song, sorry, is off of his album Divinity, and this one is called Illumination. So slow down your life. Treasure those moments that you possibly can. Take away some of the layers of the things that are there as your obligations, the things that are out there that are grasping at your attention, and let some of those things go and get back to that more simplistic way of living so that you can find the most resonant being that you can have in your life and move toward that life of simplicity. And don't give the tigers a place to grasp their claws. You get out there and actually live the most fulfilling life that you possibly can. We'll see you next time. you are a conscious thought leader, an expert on inspiration, or have your own amazing story to tell about how you've manifested your best life, we want you on the show. You can connect with us by writing to connect@livethislife.org. That's CONNECT @livethislife.org. Or you can reach out to us through the show's Calendly page at calendly.com/livethislife. And be sure to check out everything going on with the podcast at livethislife.org.